got to ask you, do you believe votes were manipulated, changed electronically in favor of Joe Biden? And if so, how was it done?
Well, I certainly do believe it, sir, because I saw it on TV on the crawls underneath television coverage of the election. At least two cases. One had about 12,000 votes that magically went from Trump to Biden, and another one about 20,000 votes. And both times, Trump's numbers decreased by exactly the number that Biden's increased. And so before any of this came about, I just had a strong inkling that something was afoot here. And the more they suggest that the intelligence service, our intelligence service, were involved in it, I tend to think that there probably was a great deal of vote marking by people when they found out how many votes they needed to surpass Trump in places like Pennsylvania and Michigan. I think clearly the Dominion company, if nothing else, it's foreign interference in the American election. It's a Canadian company. And it was storing its records in Germany and Spain for some reason.
Michael, who was behind this then?
Certainly appeared to be part of the Central Intelligence Agency. Using for their political operations overseas, they use servers and store materials and do other things. And the fact that the ones in Germany were held or grabbed by U.S. forces because they were CIA servers, and in Europe, the CIA operates under the jurisdiction of the military. And so the military was responsible for seizing those with the help of the German authorities. And those servers are now in the hands of the FBI, which doesn't make me very comfortable, but at least they're in American hands.
In the last 20 years, the Cartel del Sol has stolen $1 trillion from Venezuela's national oil company, PDVSA, and embezzled $500 billion from its national treasury. It not only has, but continues to produce and smuggle 25 to 40 metric tons of cocaine every month out of its country into the world. The Cartel del Sol is a $2 trillion transnational criminal organization and the most well-resourced criminal syndicate in history. Through bribery and investments of its funds, it controls a dozen countries and world leaders. It has massive investments in the U.S. and European financial markets and institutions. As we conducted investigations against the Cartel del Sol and presented them one after another to the U.S. Department of Justice, we noticed and pursued leads from the cartel's money laundering operations to the world of non-governmental organizations and election companies. After witnessing election irregularities associated with the 2020 U.S. presidential election, we decided to direct time and resources to Cartel del Sol links to U.S. and global election fraud. After an exhaustive 3.5-year investigation, it is indisputable. SMARTMATIC election systems was created at the direction of now deceased Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez, and its source code, the basis of its operating system, developed jointly by Venezuela's Consejo Nacional Electoral and SMARTMATIC, was designed to allow election results to be altered without the knowledge of voters and the public. Additionally, the Venezuelan CNE holds ownership of SMARTMATIC's source code. Each time the Venezuelan CNE and SMARTMATIC update the source code, a copy of it is stored at the vault at the Venezuelan Central Bank. In 2005, a European Union electoral observation mission to Venezuela published a report stating the Venezuelan regime owns SMARTMATIC source code. The Venezuelan government signed that report as factual. SMARTMATIC's first election in Venezuela was the 2003 recall election of Hugo Chavez. The CNE director at the time, Jorge Rodriguez, at the direction of the Cuban Directorate General of Intelligence, DGI, hired 3 Venezuelan American computer engineers that were graduates of Simon Bolivar University, a Venezuelan university linked to the U.S. University MIT. They had already registered a software company in Delaware and opened an office for it in Boca Raton. The engineers, Antonio Mujica, Roger Peñate, and Alfredo Anzola, established Smartmatic at the direction of the Venezuelan regime, built the source code, and flew off to Italy to buy lottery machines from Olivetti to serve as election hardware. They succeeded in altering enough votes to ensure Hugo Chavez's victory in the recall election. Secure in power, President Chavez decided to weaponize this capability beyond Venezuela's border. Smartmatic would enter into the U.S. election market in Cook County, Illinois, and the state of New Jersey for Democratic Party primary races in 2006. In 2005, Smartmatic orchestrated the purchase of Sequoia Voting Systems, Inc., a U.S. company. Sequoia was a company that had conducted elections in the U.S. for over 100 years and had a 22% market share of the U.S. electoral market. Approximately 18 months later, the Committee on Foreign Investments in the United States, CFIUS, began investigating the ownership of Smartmatic because of Smartmatic's Venezuelan connection. Smartmatic immediately put its source code in the machines, in the Sequoia machines. Smartmatic tried to conceal its Venezuelan connection by hiring a former U.S. naval officer, Jack Blaine, to set up a holding company, SVS Holding, to place its ownership of Sequoia in stock. In December 2006, Smartmatic entered into an agreement with CFIUS to sell Sequoia in 6 months. Antonio Mujica, one of the 3 original founders, then found a little-known election company in Toronto, Canada, Dominion Election Systems, that had only managed one small local election in Toronto. He arranged for Dominion to purchase Sequoia. Dominion, owned by John Polis, with that purchase of Sequoia, would inherit the licensing agreement for Smartmatic's source code, the source code owned by the Venezuelan regime, i.e. the Cartel del Sol. To be clear, Smartmatic and Dominion would ultimately sign an agreement that provided Dominion with the U.S. market and Smartmatic the international global market. The only 2 exceptions are that Smartmatic does elections in Los Angeles County and Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico was an issue they ultimately settled in court. In Caracas, in a building owned by the CNE, the Consejo Nacional Electoral, more than 100 software engineers, half from the CNE and half from Smartmatic, worked side by side. Their effort for more than a decade was to perfect the techniques of altering elections and defeating audit. In 2018, Smartmatic publicly, and with the approval of the Venezuelan regime, broke with the regime, the Cartel del Sol, because the Venezuelan CNE's theft of an election was so egregious. The techniques of the source code and machine operate and conceal a theft of an election when the spread of the candidates is between the 3 to 5 percentage points. As sophisticated as the machine is, it can be defeated with significant turnout against it. The recent 2024 election in Venezuela was also so blatantly stolen, and the machine could not conceal that massive spread either. In its place, a company called XClay took Smartmatic's place as the election provider in Venezuela. Allowing Smartmatic to exit Venezuela in this fictitious manner allowed the regime to retain its power and influence over the global electoral market. Smartmatic built a production facility for electronic voting equipment hardware just outside Beijing, China, and then shipped the hardware to a warehouse in Taiwan. In violation of U.S. law, the hardware was marked as manufactured in Taiwan and shipped to both Smartmatic and Dominion for use in U.S. elections. Dominion Voting Systems manages elections in almost all the swing states in the U.S., which determines who wins the presidency. We have evidence and witnesses that can prove the source code operating the election machines of both Smartmatic and Dominion and other election companies are owned by the Venezuelan narco regime. And we have evidence and witnesses proving the machines are manufactured in the People's Republic of China.
They learned about this in around 2007, these capabilities. Barack Obama and John Brennan started using it in July of 2009. They set up the Arlington, Virginia NGO called SEPS. George Soros staffed it. The CIA funded it through USAID, $5.9 billion. And they spread this junk technology from the Philippines to Netherlands and everywhere. You know how in the Netherlands, the government's like shutting down farming and the people are all against it, but they keep on electing these lefties. They're not really getting elected. They're getting elected on Smartmatic equipment. It's an overthrow. It's genius.